Hey everyone, this is Andrew at Plainview Farm. It's taken a little while, but I finally have my fences the way that I want them. If you've been paying attention to what's been going on the channel here recently, you've seen that I have finally built some cross fences in order to establish or set up a grazing system or grazing management system for my cattle. It basically consists of cross fencing. Now that grazing system makes it easy for me to manage the cattle and basically steer them where I want them to go to eat the grass that I want them to eat at the right time. In fact, I've got them on a piece of ground here right now that they'll probably only be on for a couple days simply because there's not a whole lot of grass growing there, and then eventually we'll move them on to another spot. But the purpose of today's video is not necessarily to talk about that grazing system per se, but to follow up on a video that I made, about a year and a half ago, actually whenever I was just starting my channel. In that video, I made a very clear and definitive statement, which was I will never build another barbed wire fence. And standing here today, I will still never build another barbed wire fence, and I'm even more certain of that today than I was then, and I'm going to explain why. Of course, there's different fencing options out there for different applications based on what you're doing, but for me, and I believe probably for a lot of other folks as well, I think high tensile electric is the only way to go. Now, I'll mention this, that I do have woven wire around my house, around the yard, simply because my wife doesn't want the electric fence holding the kids in the yard. She would rather use something like woven wire. So that's what we put around the yard. You can also use woven wire as a perimeter fence. It makes a great perimeter fence if you are trying to keep in virtually any kind of animal. However, on my perimeters, I don't have woven wire. I have high tensile electric. Now, this fence that you're looking at right here is a 7-strand high tensile electric fence. We have T-posts as our line posts that are roughly 30 feet apart. Now, I mentioned that it's 7 strands. There are 4 strands that are energized and 3 strands that are grounded. The reason that I used 7 strands is because I have goats and I live next to an airport, and I do not want my animals getting onto the airport. So 7 strands of high tensile electric, in my experience, which has been, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 years of building fences like this. I built fences like this on another property, and about 2.5 years, well, actually, I guess now 3 years of having fences like this on this property, and I've not had any problems with animals getting on the airport. My 7-strand high tensile electric fence has done exactly what I wanted it to do. So you may be asking yourself the question, well, what does that have to do with barbed wire? Well, I took out a 5-strand barbed wire fence in order to put up this high tensile electric. Now that 5-strand barbed wire was worn out and it needed to come down. There were multiple spots in this fence where the wire was broken. There were T-posts in this fence, but they were few and far between. Most of the posts that were in this fence were old wooden posts that were put here decades ago. Now, I'm a firm believer that fencing should not be overly complicated and it should be economical. And the primary reason that I am a huge proponent of high tensile electric is because of how economical it is. And I'm going to run through a few numbers with you really quick here. So for comparison's sake, a 1/4 mile of fence exactly like this one right here that I'm standing next to, compared to a 1/4 mile of gaucho barbed wire, which is this stuff right here. And I got these prices again just today, okay? These are today's prices, which is April 27th, 2024. So this wire, a 4-point 15.5 gauge gaucho, which is 1,320 feet or 1/4 mile of wire. The price that I was quoted is $65 a roll. 6-foot steel T-posts that come with clips are $4.79 per post. I'm not going to include corner posts because whether you're building a woven wire fence, a barbed wire fence, or a high tensile electric, you have to have some sort of corner post bracing system. So like I said, I'm not going to include that in the price here. So a 5-strand barbed wire, which is 5 rolls of wire at $65 a wire, plus our T-post, which will space at 15 feet per post, or between the posts. And I'm not including any stays in this, okay? Our wire expense is $325 and 87 posts. Again, that includes to span between the corner posts is $416.73, or a total of $741.73, which equals 56 cents per foot for a quarter mile, or actually for however many miles you want to build a fence. 56 cents per foot for a 5-strand barbed wire fence. Now for a 12.5 gauge high tensile electric, it comes in rolls of 4,000 feet, and I was quoted a price of $140 for 4,000 feet of wire. The insulators come out at 52 cents a piece. I would need 4 per post. My end insulators, my termination insulators, I would need 8 of those. I was quoted 60 cents a piece. My inline strainers, I would need 7 of those at $3.89 each. For a quarter mile of wire is $323.40 of 7 strands. Again, 7 strands over a quarter mile, $323.40. The posts would be spaced at 30 feet, such as what we have right here. You can space high tensile electric. You can space your line posts out with high tensile electric much further than you can with barbed wire, and actually 30 feet is probably about the closest that you want. There are folks that on flat straight land, they go well over 30 feet per line post. So 43 line posts spaced at 30 feet would be $205.97, and again, those include the T-post clips for the wires that are grounded. There would need to be 3 for each post. So the total for a quarter mile of 7-strand high tensile electric, including insulators, strainers, and everything, would be $650.83, or 49 cents per foot. And the savings there from a 5-strand barbed wire to a 7-strand 12.5 gauge high tensile is $90.90. Now, if you don't plan on having goats or sheep or pigs like I do, anything that may potentially go through a wider spaced wire, then maybe you want to put in a 5-strand high tensile electric instead. So I've got the numbers for that too. The wire, a quarter mile of 5-strand high tensile electric is $231. The posts again would be the same, $205.97 or for 43 posts, $67.08 for the line insulators, $3 and 60 cents for the end insulators. That's 3 hot and 2 ground wires, and then $19.45 for your inline strainers. So the total for that fence would be $527 and a few cents. So the price of the fence then drops to 40 cents a foot, and the difference in cost from a 5-strand barbed wire to a 5-strand high tensile electric is a savings of almost $215. So now, again, if you're only building a quarter mile of fence, well, $215 is a pretty good savings. But if you build a mile of fence, right, you're going to save almost $860, right? A little over $850 in a mile of fence. Now, that is way more than enough money to buy a good quality energizer, to buy ground rods, to buy all of the things that you would need, okay, in order to connect your fence wire together, to basically hook it all up to the electric system and electrify this fence. You're going to have way more than you need. You're still going to have money left over. For instance, my Energizer runs about $170. It's a 2-joule 50-mile or 165-acre Energizer, and it does well beyond what I need it to in order to keep the goats and the cows and the donkeys and the pigs and whatever else in. Even my dogs, they don't want to go through this fence. They don't want to touch it. And now you may also say, well, what about your electric use per year? You know, there's additional expense, right? in that Energizer, having to run that Energizer? Well, you could put a solar panel onto it. You could get a solar Energizer, and well, the energy would be free at that point. Or you could plug it into 110 outlet, which is what I've done. I've got mine plugged into 110 outlet in the well house, and based on what the manufacturer says about the about the Energizer, it only uses 4.5 watts per hour, which is 0.0045 kilowatts. And so if you add all this up, if you do the math, 24 hours running the Energizer 24 hours a day at 0.0045 kilowatts, we get 0.108 kilowatts times 365 days is 39.42 kilowatt hours, okay? So if we multiply that by my current rate, which is 11.23 cents per kilowatt hour, we come up with $4.43 a year to electrify my fences. Now, there are also going to be folks out there that say, well, what about maintenance? Of course, you know, you're going to have maintenance, you're going to have these issues. And I'll tell you this, whenever I first built this fence, I had a lot of deer that would run through here and pop these insulators off, and I'd have to come back and put them back on. But, you know, that doesn't happen very often anymore. I mentioned that this fence has been here. These fences have been on this farm, the exterior fences anyway, for about 3 years now. And I think we've got the deer pretty well trained. Honestly, we don't have deer crossing these fences anymore. They've stopped. And one of the reasons is because my ground wires are grounded back to the grounding system. So if anything goes in between the wires, they get shocked. They feel the full force of the Energizer. You know, there's no jumping up and going in between wires. If they touch 2 wires at one time, again, because they're alternated between hot and ground, then they are going to feel the full power of the Energizer. So like I said, every once in a while we might have a deer run through, but the good thing is my Energizer will tell me if there's a problem. There's a little red light on it that blinks, and when that little red light's not doing its job, it tells me that there's a problem in the fence. So if I look out into the well house and I see that the Energizer isn't blinking like it's supposed to, I know that, hey, I need to check something out. Now, I promise you that your barbed wire fence is not going to tell you whenever something has run through and broke a wire. Usually what happens is you find out that there's a problem with your barbed wire fence whenever your animal ends up getting where it's not supposed to be. Now, I will say this for the sake of full disclosure, the fences on each end of my property where I join my neighbors, they are both barbed wire fences because they're good fences. Now, if those were to have to be torn down and my neighbors did not object, I would be putting high tensile electric in their place. And I'll tell you this, each one of those fences, even though they are barbed wire, they do have electric in them in order to make sure, again, that I'm able to get the electric from one side of the property to the other without any issues for that purpose, and to make sure that my animals stay where they're supposed to stay, because my animals know how an electric fence works. So now, again, the cross fences, as you can see here, this is a very simple fence, okay? There's not much to it. I've got a single corner post and 2 wires. That's all there is to it. This is 14 gauge high tensile electric. We stepped down from 12.5 gauge because the wire is even cheaper than 12.5 gauge wire, and we didn't need 12.5 gauge wire on the interior. So my cross fences, what I'm standing in right here is a central alleyway, and I have a 16-foot alleyway right here, 24-foot gates. This is what these are right here, so I can move in and out easily with equipment, truck, trailer, whatever I need to do. I can get turned through there without any problems. But this is a pretty simple setup, again, that allows me to move my animals around, move my cattle throughout the property here without much trouble at all. And I'll also mention this as well, okay, this is only 20 acres, but you can have way more than 20 acres and still use this kind of setup. Actually, the person that got me into electric fencing had quite a bit larger farm than this. I mean, we're talking a couple 100-acre farm, and he had electric fence and it was flawless. His cattle did the same thing. They wouldn't even consider testing his fences. So my cross fences, there's roughly 3,600 feet of fence in these cross fences. Like I said, a single corner post, I'm not going to include the corner post in the price, number one, because I got these corner posts for free. These are old utility poles. To each his own on this kind of thing. I know there's some folks that would say, oh, you need to drive in steel posts. But hey, a free post is a free post. Like I said, fencing should not be overly burdensome to the expenses, the cost of your operation, right? You're trying to turn a profit, and if you're spending a fortune on fencing, that makes it a whole lot harder to turn a profit. So even if I had to buy corner posts, I could drive a single 3-4 inch steel post and do exactly what I did with these. Still accomplish the same thing, but I'm not going to factor that into the price comparison here for the sake of you got to have corner posts when you're building fence. So like I said, I've got 3,600 feet of cross fencing here in my grazing system. This is 14 gauge high tensile wire. This wire costs 2.4 cents per foot, and there are 2 strands. Okay, so the strainers that I used are $1.83 each. On this, I stepped down to a little bit lower quality of strainer, and I bought them in bulk in order to do this. 2 strainers per pull, or 2 strainers per, 1 strainer per wire. The posts that I use, the line posts, are just 3/8 inch fiberglass with clips, and 2 clips per post, 1 for each wire. The post with the clips is $2.15 each. Now the termination or the end insulators, which are these right here, were 99 cents each. For this fence, the gate handles down here that I have were $2.05 each, and the gate hooks that connect them and make sure that, you know, the gate stays, or gate handle stays where it's supposed to, those are $3.75 each. So now let's break all this down. What I spent in wire for 3,600 feet of 2 strands of 14 gauge wire was $172.80. The strainers, there were 20 of them for $36.60. The posts were $193.50, which that was my largest expense. And that's probably going to be the largest expense no matter what you're doing. You know, posts are expensive no matter what you do. And these posts are spaced roughly 30 feet apart, just like my line posts on the perimeter fence. So there were 90 of these line posts on my cross fences. The end insulators, 70 of them to $69.30. The gate handles came to $49.20, and the gate hooks or hangers were exactly $16. There were 16 of those, and again, there were 24 gate handles because I have 12 gate openings here. So the total for all of that for this cross fence, I spent $700 again because, you know, you buy things in the packaging that they come in. So I spent $700, but I do have some materials left over. But what I actually have in the fence out here is $581.40, or 16 cents per foot, and that includes, again, gates. So now what's common in this part of the world, at least, is for cross fences that are used or built using barbed wire, for those fences to be 4 strands. And again, we're going to figure 15.5 gauge gaucho. We're going to figure the cheap stuff here. 3,600 feet of wire, okay, of fence. Now this estimate does not include gates, because for barbed wire you have to have physical gates. So 3,600 feet of barbed wire fence with the posts being spaced at 15 feet between line posts, and 4 strands of barbed wire, you end up at $1,845.63. That breaks down to 51 cents per foot. Now this fence that I have right here, which is a 2-strand electric, is only 16 cents per foot. So the difference between those 2 fences, again, this one, 2-strand electric with gates, okay, with electric gates, compared to a 4-strand barbed wire without gates, is $1,264.23 in savings. So now let's break the whole thing down together, okay? I have 3,000 feet of exterior fence right now in 7-strand high tensile electric. If I were to build that today, based on the prices that I gave you a little bit ago, 49 cents per foot, the total would be $1,470. Now, if I were to build 3,000 feet of 5-strand barbed wire, 15.5 gauge 4-barb fence, it would be $1,680 for that same fence. Now, again, the price for my cross fences was what I have here, my 14 gauge electric with gates, $581.40. 4-strand barbed wire would be $18.45 and 63 cents. Okay, so the totals would be, right? Grand totals for electric, as I have it, if I were to start all over, would be $2,051.40. Okay, and that's again for the perimeter fence and for the interior fence, including gates on the interior. If I were to build the exact same thing with barbed wire, the total price would be $3,525.63. Okay, the difference there is $1,474.23. Now, then if you start figuring in gates, okay, if I had to hang 12 gates, and if I shrunk the openings to 12 foot, which I hate 12-foot gates, you can call me a bad driver, whatever you want to, I hate 12-foot gates, but if I were to buy the cheap economy 12-foot gates, 12 of those cheap gates would cost $1,439.88. If you add the savings, okay, if you add the savings together, here you have $1,474.23 plus $1,439.88. You have $2,914.11. So we're just a little bit shy of $3,000 for me to fence my 20 acres, to put perimeter fence on both of the sides or on two sides and cross fence the interior. Like I said before, it only cost me $4.42 to run the Energizer. So if you subtract the cost of the Energizer, the cost of the ground rods, the cost of the jumper wires, everything that you would need to hook it all up together, I'm going to be able to run my electric fence for roughly, I don't know, 600 years before I break even. And of course, like I said before, I know that there's folks out there, they have preferences one way or another for doing things the way that they want to do. But I'm here to tell you right now, okay, and there is no denying this, okay, that electric fence, high tensile electric fence, is far more economical for your farm than barbed wire, woven wire, probably anything else that you can come up with. And I say probably because generally it's hard to live in a world where there are absolutes, okay? There's probably going to be somebody out there that can find something that's a little bit cheaper. But again, at the end of the day, high tensile electric is going to stand head and shoulders as far as economics go and practicality over just about any other fencing option that there is today. And that doesn't even include how easy it is to build. I built this interior fence in a very short amount of time. It didn't take very long to pull this wire. There's nothing for the wire to snag on, again, because it's smooth. It goes up very quickly. I can build a 1/4 mile of high tensile electric much faster than I can build a 1/4 mile of barbed wire. And I promise you, I've done both. The farm that I grew up on, we had barbed wire everywhere, and it seemed like we were always building new fences. Dad was always replacing fences somewhere, and hey, I was part of his cheap labor force. So now, if you want to know more about electric fencing, I have some other videos out there. I'll try to be sure to include those in the description below, with links to those in the description below. And if you have any questions or comments about any number of things, if I know the answer, I'll do my best to get it to you. Post your comment down below. If I don't know the answer, I will try to figure it out, or at least maybe try to steer you to a resource that does know the answer. And also, let me know if you'd like me to do a video about Energizers. That's something that I've thought about doing in the past, and I wouldn't mind to do something like that again in the future if folks are interested in something like that. So I hope you found this video to be useful, if not enjoyable. If you did, please do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content, if you like the videos on my channel, and you haven't yet, please subscribe. As always, I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.